Hello everybody, here we are today continuing on with our season recaps for the 2023 CFL season, today talking about the Saskatchewan Roughriders. So before we start talking about that, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or the CFL, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So 2022 saw the Saskatchewan Roughriders go 6-12 and miss the playoffs for the first time since 2016. 2023 was hoping to get back to normalcy with what they'd built in recent years. Gone was Cody Fajardo, a man that I think at times was the scapegoat for a lot of their problems, and brought in was veteran quarterback Trevor Harris on a 2-year deal that wasn't too bad for his paycheck. This was a side going into the year. You thought if everything went right, they probably were a playoff team. Things started off relatively well. They kicked off the year 3-1, and after their first 4 games, picking up 3 victories is nice. All 3 of those wins were relatively close. 2 of those were against the Elks. They barely squeaked out a win against them, 12-11. That might have been like week 1 or 2. So you weren't thinking, wow, this is incredible, but you were thinking, well, 3 wins out of 4 games, probably good enough to get us to where we want to be, and that's the playoffs. Problem is, even after picking up 2 of those wins in overtime, they would go to Calgary. I believe it might have been in Saskatchewan. Either way, it really isn't relevant to this point. And that's that Trevor Harris ends up getting hurt and missing, the rest of the year. And with it, the Riders end up going between Mason Fine and Jake Delacala. Through their first 11 games, things aren't looking terrible. Again, they're not a side that's able to rack up a ton of wins, but they are 6-5 after 11 and are still well and truly looking like they will go on to make the playoffs. Now, the problem is they go on to lose their next 7 in a row, which is something that I believe they did in their final 7 games of the season prior. Either way, they did have a 7-game losing streak in 2022, and they went from being a team that looked like a playoff lock to just missing out because the Calgary Stampeders decided late in the year when they were like 4-10, hey, we do kind of want to keep our playoff streak alive. Saskatchewan keeps losing. Let's just go out there and win a couple games and keep the gravy train rolling. And to be honest, the fans did have a lot of reasons to be angry this season with what we saw. They had a 51-6 loss to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Tough year where they were looking like they were going to get back. Instead, they missed out on the playoffs in back-to-back seasons for the first time since 2015 and 2016. I think part of the problem here with this team is they were able to move the ball, but they also kind of had to rely on their quarterbacks, which were inexperienced, probably not who you're hoping to have out there. In the run game, finished with the lowest yards per carry in the league. Jamal Morrow had some games where he probably just wanted to hide the tape and then, change the box score. There was one game where he had 12 carries for 11 yards or 11 carries for 12 yards. Either way, about a yard per carry. The offensive line ranked 7th for run blocking and 8th for pass blocking according to Pro Football Focus, and they did allow 53 sacks, which was less than what they had last season, or 2022 I should say, with Cody Fajardo, but still a decent amount where they were struggling. I do believe they had a couple issues in the left side of the line. Could be wrong about that. Again, I really should do these a lot earlier after the season's over so I can focus on these things. Defensively, there were a lot of issues as well. Didn't get a lot of sacks on the year, actually the fewest in the league, and they also allowed the league's most passing touchdowns. They had the highest points per game allowed defensively. They had the second lowest, I do believe, points per game offensively. All around kind of a recipe for failure. And earlier I talked about how this team could move the chains. I think that was nice. Sean Payton Jr. did have a good year, but they just couldn't put points on the board, and defensively they struggled to be able to keep points off the board. There were times in the season, especially that final stretch of the year, where things kind of felt helpless, and you can see where some of the things went wrong. Now, after this season, I think this year's going to look different for them. The defense, especially in all 3 phases of the game, going to look different. You're looking at guys being released, guys that signed with other teams, and guys that retired. So the defense is going to have some things they're going to have to figure out, especially if their last year was not great. But the end result was they had a new offensive coordinator, and they ended up not producing the offensive results that they wanted. And Greg Dickinson, of course, ends up getting fired after back-to-back seasons where they go 6-12 and fail to make the playoffs. Win really the final third of the season, which I do believe, again, was pretty much exactly like 2022, is where all this unraveled. Because the first 2/3 of the season, you're thinking, oh, we are set. Final third, you're saying, how in the world did we miss the playoffs, especially this year? I was like, ugh, good grief. But as they say, it's the way she goes sometimes. So We are going to get to see if this team with Harris healthy in 2024 is actually able to get back to the postseason, or if they'll miss playoffs for a third straight year. I'd have to look at when that was the last time that they did that. We'll talk about that in season previews as we get closer and closer to that, but we have 2 more season recaps to do that'll be put out later this week. Anyway, what are your thoughts on the Saskatchewan Roughriders this season, and do you think that they will get back to the playoffs in 2024? Let me know down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe and have a great night.